I think it's pretty unacceptable from our point of view that we would just almost like settle for an easy to execute team comp when our goal, our vision isn't to beat TSM or TL. Our goal is to go to Worlds and compete internationally and get out of group stages.
This is Azento from Esports Heaven, and I have here with me Max Waldo, coach for Cloud9. Now, I want to get into a little bit of your history at first, and that you came from Korea previously with BBQ Olivers. You know, you studied with LS as well, and you also, I think, had or at least have multiple high elo accounts in several different roles. And it kind of reminds me of famously, I think it was Mata that had 5 different accounts in Challenger and all different roles. So I just want to get your thoughts in general on players mastering different roles to a high degree. Should pro players be somewhat high elo in all roles? Like, what's your entire philosophy on this, I guess?
All right, that's cool. Yeah, you have around the block, huh? Yeah, you definitely, you definitely heard. Um, so yeah, absolutely. I think pro players should be able to proficiently play every role. Uh, and the reason why this is so important is because you have to have an understanding of every role to play your role at an elite level. So I can't be the best jungler in the world if I don't understand lanes at an elite level. So I have to be able to combine these ideas so that I can make like fast-paced decisions,
Hmm.
like with information and context regarding every role that I'm interacting with. So yeah, my philosophy for how I treat this issue is that League of Legends is very underdeveloped because so many pro players are only proficient at their one role.
So back in my day, we had to fight in solo queue for our role as first pick. Now I don't know if you're familiar with that back in the day. I don't know when you started playing, but that's how it was back in the day. First pick was usually, you got to pick jungle or mid lane or whatever, and then last pick was oftentimes the support, and they just had to deal with it, right? So do you think, I guess, maybe role selection has had a detriment on the League of Legends player base?
Okay. First of all, I started playing League of Legends in August 2010. So
Oh, okay.
even though, I might be 21, okay, but I started playing when I was like 11 years old. And this was actually something that came up when Riot started this whole role selection system, is that it did sort of funnel everybody into just like the one position they preferred, and there was no reason to ever branch out. Because like you could just select mid instead of like somebody else saying mid first in your champion select, and then you have to pick a different role. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely funneled people into just their narrow pathways in League.
So I want to harken back to a previous interview that you did with with Invent Global, where you said it was difficult to tell if a coach is providing value. And I think one way in which I think you said in an AMA, one way you would try and do that is to help, or I guess focus your efforts through helping players through lane phase, even offering to play certain scenarios out to have the player understand the concept. So, being as I think your main role is top lane, if I'm not mistaken, how has that been working with Fudge as a top laner?
So yeah, I work with Fudge probably the closest because I have the most information to grasp towards for top lane. I have just the most to offer. I can totally still work with mid lane, can totally still work with bot lane. I can totally still talk about like how jungle interacts with those lanes. But for top lane, this has been like my main focus as well because Fudge is also the newest player, the player who has played professionally for like the least amount of time. So it's easier to fill this role, but also like this is where I'm most comfortable. So yeah, we play one versus ones. We play out like certain scenarios over and over, and we talk about like different ways to play lane that like we haven't seen anybody really do. Uh, these are like these are ideas that it feels easy to communicate with Fudge because our the way we can communicate is very efficient because we've been talking so much. So I really like these sort of interactions that we get to have because it feels very productive.
Mm,
Because we get to go through a lot of this like um, hmm, it's something to describe how we communicate so efficiently where we
maybe
don't
like
have to say much.
yeah, it's kind of like you become a little telepathic with the person somewhat.
Yeah, we don't have to talk a whole lot to communicate some like full ideas.
Hmm.
That it's very satisfying. Yeah.
So I want to get your thoughts on ease of execution team comps. I don't think a whole lot of people talk about this, and I know some coaches like to heavily lean into ease of execution, versus others want to get maybe a good ideal draft that might work in certain counter scenarios but are harder to pull off. Today we saw your guys' team comp with Nar, Lilia, Victor, Caitlyn, and Morgana against, I think, what some would consider as a dive comp of Hecarim, Renekton, and Kai'Sa. So how do you go into a game with the philosophy of ease of execution versus ideal composition?
So a big goal for Cloud9 is that we're competitive internationally. So I think it's pretty unacceptable from our point of view that we would just almost like settle for an easy to execute team comp when our goal, our vision isn't to beat TSM or TL. Our goal is to go to Worlds and compete internationally and get out of group stage and compete in quarters and semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like the only intuitive decision, the only obvious decision to make is to challenge ourselves with harder to execute team compositions that we believe are better because we have to achieve higher standards to be able to compete internationally where NA has so consistently failed.
Hmm. Okay, so I want to go into maybe another reason why NA has failed. With Perkz, he's been heavily praised for his ability to side lane, and it seems like he understands it a lot better than other players in the LCS. What's your opinion on the side laning capabilities of North America?
Yeah, this is really interesting because of course Perkz is so good at this. Perkz is so good at side laning, obviously from how he was at G2, and G2 is such an interesting environment to think of. That they were so creative and so flexible with how they picked their champions and played the game, how they team fought. Uh, they were like a lot of people used to talk about how they were like scary to play against, how it was always so chaotic playing against G2, and I think Perkz like brings a lot of that, but it's I can only describe it as like controlled chaos. That he knows what he wants to accomplish, especially in side lane, especially mid game. He really knows what he wants to accomplish, and how he gets there. It might be like a bumpy road, but he gets there so effectively, especially in side lane. Um, this is obviously like, uh, obviously I've stated this in the past. That if you've seen my the article with Inven, I've mentioned that like Perkz in the first 10 minutes of the game starts out like much slower, but once he gets in the side lane, it's like he becomes so creative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks more controlled, but it's like deliberate. He becomes more deliberate with everything he does. I think that's really cool.
Hmm. So finally, I want to touch on the topic of Drake control because I don't know if you saw the game of Evil Geniuses versus Dignitas, but it was very scrappy. It was very back and forth, and there was a lot of contests against the Drake. Some people stealing it, and it was just very hectic. But with that said, there seems to be a lot of hectic scenarios next to the Drake pit, and teams kind of being able to just walk in for free. So, what's your opinion on, I guess, the Drake scenario or the Drake setup? I guess is even more important when it comes to North America, and I guess how they're handling Drakes.
Yeah, I think we do a really bad job around objectives in general. Uh, a lot of this is because we lack foresight for the objective, whether this is due to us just not planning for an objective like minutes in advance, as like for example, I believe that it's totally reasonable that you could begin to prepare dragons like 2 minutes in advance, 90 seconds, 2 minutes in advance. I think is pretty easy. But also it's about understanding like the roles of the team compositions and what the responsibility is on each team composition to do and act like. And I think when we understand these two things really rigidly, it will be much more controlled and much more easy to be able to take Baron in a way that has like lower variance, where it'll be more obvious, especially for someone like a spectator, to see that like the person who like walks towards the dragon and like sets up the vision on it is like going to get it. But right
Mm.
now, whether it's like a lack of foresight or a lack of understanding of the team composition roles, we're not able to do this consistently right now.
Hmm. All right. Well, it's been a wonderful time talking with you, Max Waldo. And I look forward to Cloud9 in playoffs because you guys have already secured it. So, congratulations. And yeah, unfortunately, with this loss, you guys at least have a little bit of homework to deal with against TSM. So, all right. This has been Azento from Esports Heaven and Max Waldo from Cloud9. Thank you for your time.